Okay, in my previous lesson I reviewed some of the components of what makes a subordinate versus an independent clause, and also we practiced classifying different clauses as either being subordinate and independent according to some certain rules, namely, does it have a subordinating conjunction or not. I've been teaching this in the context of comma usage, and actually the rule put here is if the subordinate clause comes first, leading into an independent clause, a comma is needed after the subordinate clause, and that's because there's a pause between the two. We have to take a breath. If the independent clause leads into a subordinate clause, then no comma is needed between the two. But one of the biggest and most important essential questions for understanding these relationships in grammar is, why are subordinating conjunctions and clauses really important for good writing? See, and I think that that's generally what's lacking when we classify or diagram sentences ad nauseum, is, well, why is this important to our writing? And so I'm laying out some rationale for why we need to teach and understand subordinating conjunctions and clauses and the like. First thing, there was a saying that I had heard in college, and it said writing equals thinking. And I believe it, because if you can't write your thoughts into clear, complex, and easy to understand sentences, that usually reflects the fact that you can't think very well, and vice versa. So I think one of the reasons when we fashion our language a certain way, when we have complex ideas and complex sentences, is it's because we need to be clear, and we need to also show that our thinking is clear and that we're using logic and reasoning. Complex sentences then show complex thinking, and that's one of the things that's a very important state standard and part of the national core standards. Secondly, and I think this is a really, really big deal, and I'm going to harp on this, is that subordinate conjunctions and subordinate clauses show relationships between thoughts and ideas. And that's a big key, and this is why you need to use subordinating conjunctions and subordinate clauses. And in the next lesson after this, lesson 4D, I'm actually going to show one piece of writing with transitional phrases and with subordinating clauses, and then the very same writing without them. And you'll see that one sounds rather childish and a little more difficult to follow and choppy, and the other one flows evenly and smoothly. But this is one of the biggest things, is we need to have relationships in our thoughts and ideas, and being able to use this in our toolbox is going to be very important. And I say this fact is crucial. Let me give examples then of the relationships and how subordinate clauses help us to understand those relationships. The first key relationship that subordinating conjunctions show are cause-effect and logical relationships. And some of the examples of subordinating conjunctions which show cause-effect are because, or so that, if only, in order that. When you go from one clause to another and the word because links the two together, it's obvious that one has caused the other, or one is the result of the other. The same thing with if and if only, in order that. And I give some examples here. The school will stay open because the test scores went up. Well, I ask a question about this. What is the logical relationship between this and this? Did the test scores go up because the school will stay open, or the school will stay open because the test scores went up? And that's why the placement of a subordinating conjunction is crucial. It's obvious this has caused the first one. We look at the next one. Writing better sentences will be easier if you can understand what is going on. What causes each one? Well, here you go. Here we go. This shows the logical relationship. If you're understanding what's going on, you're going to be able to write better sentences. So here we go. Cause, and then the effect. Here in the red text, you see it says inversions of the previous statements using our comma rule. Well, remember, our comma rule is if the subordinate clause is first, we got to have a pause there. And so Same exact example from above, except for all I did was invert the clause order. Because the test scores went up, the school will stay open. We're saying the exact same thing. We're still establishing the same logical relationship between the ideas here. Only difference is we put them in a different order, and because we started with the subordinate clause, there's a pause. And the same thing is true with this one. If you can understand what is going on, writing better sentences will be easier. And so it's the exact same argument and assertion as the example above that I just highlighted, except I just inverted the order that they took place. But the logical relationship is still in place because of the placement of the if next to that clause. And what's funny is I forgot to type the word you, which sometimes when I'm in a hurry I omit words, and they're not needless, so we need to be a little more wary of that. Another huge thing then that subordinating conjunctions do is they show time relationships. They show either something happened before, or something is happening now in the present, or is happening simultaneously, or happened simultaneously, or it's going to happen in the future, or it happens for a certain duration. We have since. Okay, well, that means an event happened in the past and goes to the present. After, well, obviously something happened after one thing. When, so that can be, that varies. Before, when, while, which I repeated when a couple times, once, as long as, and notice that means that the duration of one thing is directly related to the duration of something else. So subordinating conjunctions show time relationships, and here we go with our examples. Since I made a clear argument, people should understand the case. Fairly straightforward. And we know this happened before this would happen, and it's because of that subordinating conjunction since right there. I believe that while I believe that most people are inherently good, some people are evil. Notice this while, even though it's a subordinating conjunction, shows that both of those things are happening simultaneously. So here you go. It's time. It's showing it's happening at the same time. Once the solution became apparent, everyone agreed with the professor. And here it is. This happened after this one. So that once is a time relationship. After the dust settled, the running back had landed in the end zone for the touchdown. Notice that the dust had settled, then people saw this. Once again, it's the relationship of perception in time. And I have inversions of some of the examples from above. Some people are evil, while I believe that most people are inherently good. Notice we don't have a comma here because the subordinate clause is second. People should understand the case since I made a clear argument. Once again, this is an independent clause leading into the subordinate. There's no pause, therefore no comma. Another key relationship is contrasting relationships that subordinating conjunctions do. The biggest ones that are used on a common basis are whereas, although, and unless. Here's an example. I support helping public schools, whereas the governor thinks that vouchers to private schools would help students. Notice the subordinating conjunction here. That whereas, it's a contrasting idea from this one, which is mine, versus the idea of the governor. That whereas is a subordinating conjunction. Although many high school teachers say they are passionate about teaching kids, comma, they tend to be more passionate about the content area they teach. And that's actually based upon several studies of teachers and their perceptions. But notice, we started with the subordinate clause. Although many high school teachers say that they are passionate about teaching kids, pause, and then we have our independent clause. And what we have is the although as a subordinating conjunction, and this contrasts with that because of that word, although. My argument stands unless you can prove it wrong. Once again, the unless is a comparing and contrasting subordinating conjunction. Here's this, and then here is its opposite, or its adversary. So I'm just going to recap right quick about why subordinating conjunctions and subordinate clauses are important for effective writing. The number one thing that I hope you remember from this lesson is that writing and thought are the same thing, and if your writing is complex, like these sentences above, showing logical or time relationships between things, your thoughts are definitely complex. So writing and thinking go hand in hand. And then number two, relationships between ideas become more clear with the use of subordinating conjunctions. And the next lesson after this is actually I'm going to give an example of some writing that I've done where I've edited out all the transitional phrases and the subordinating conjunctions, and one will sound rather childish and less easy to understand, and the other one will sound logical and erudite, which means scholarly and polished in nature, and will be easier to follow. So this is why subordinate clauses are very important for effective writing, and why complex sentences have been written into the common core standards for the states.